this work with Alex Panfilo and Jonas Geiping, among others, we work on a threat model for jailbreaks. So you probably already know about jailbreaks, and this is a simple example that basically without adversarial suffix, you have a safe response, and with adversarial suffix, you have a malicious response. And here the request is to make biological warfare agents, which is bad. The challenges in this landscape is at first that usually stronger attacks have higher perplexity, and they are easily detected with a filter, with a perplexity filter. And currently there is no unified threat model to compare those attacks on different models. And thus it's like hard to actually make some development in the field. The third one is that fair evaluation of attacks actually requires adaptive attacks, adaptive to a threat model, and thus requires a well-defined threat model. So more concretely, problem number one is that we have many different attacks. They compare to each other in different features, and it's super hard to understand what actually is happening. Kind of one claims I'm better in ASR, but I don't consider perplexity. Another says, oh, I consider perplexity, but kind of I'm worse in ASR. So is there like one metric, right? So we say we want to have a threat model with this desiderata to actually be able to have one metric to compare them. And the desiderata are that it should be LLM agnostic because we want it to work on different attacks and different models. It should be interpretable because we want to understand how actually it is working and like when it is filtering out some particular responses. And it should be fast because if we want to make adaptive attacks, they should be efficient for fair evaluation. And more about the problem two is that this is an example of a very successful attack. You can see that suffix is a very clearly non-natural, and it's very easy to detect it, and it leads to malicious response. The request is the same about biological warfare agents. And our basically solution to how to compare like such attacks is by introducing a threat model which relies on bigram perplexity and flops. For both of them, one has to select correctly thresholds to account for a utility security trade-off. Because one has to set basically a threat model such that it allows for as much as possible natural input and filters all the basically adversarial input. So with the threat model in mind, this is an example of the same attack, but the suffix is much more natural, as you can see. So this is just a feeling what's happening. In more detail, we have a setting where we have an attacker and it has a budget in perplexity, and we kind of control it via engram and in compute, and we control it in flops. And it tries to break the model. So we compare all of the attacks on different models fairly in this setting, because we set the same budget in perplexity and compute. So as you can see here, the yellow area corresponds to actually our correctly or like chosen basically utility security trade-off, such that 99.9% of real text passes through. And on the right, you can see how actually adaptive attacks work. The solid squares, they go down, meaning that our threat model correctly kind of decreases ASR. And it's the same for all attacks and models. I will skip, basically, I'll be brief because of the time. One of the statements is that discrete optimization attacks, such as PRS and GCG, are actually the best in the threat model. Because before, many people went into this direction of creating attacks such as Autodone, Beast, and Pair, where they were only considering perplexity and saying that GCG and PRS are not important, so these very high perplexity attacks, because they can be easily detected. They might be not, but actually with the correct threat model, when you can adapt to the threat model and create lower perplexity, more realistic attacks, they are, and they are the best performant ones. Moreover, as I mentioned before, we get also interpretability. We can see, for example, here, that the baseline PRS attack is less realistic. So the more you are to the left, so to speak, the more realistic you are. But if you adapt, so this is a green, basically, color. If you adapt to our threat model, it becomes much more realistic. And you can also compare, basically, what's happening for the same attack on different models. So, for example, for Llama 3, it already starts from realistic attacks, while our adaptive version even makes it even more realistic. Moreover, Like here on the left, you see our training data and distribution across different like sub-data sets. And you can see that we can also interpret which data sources are used in a particular attack on particular model. And we can see here that, for example, GCG heavily oversamples from code. So to conclude, I would say that we introduced a unified threat model for attacks and models that allows us to adapt attacks and thus evaluate them efficiently and adapt to perplexity. And we find that discrete optimization attacks are still the best in our threat model. Thank you so much, and I'm open to questions.